So when I met this woman, she has 2 children. One of them was taken into continuing custody many years ago, but when the ministry couldn't find a foster home for that child, they dumped it back off on her doorstep and said, this child is still in continuing custody, meaning she has no rights over the child, but she's the one responsible for looking after the child in her home now.
And the child's her own child, right?
Yeah, and then her second child, quite a bit younger, had some special needs, and she wanted a little bit of help with him. She went to the ministry and said, I really need a break. He was quite high special needs child. So she put him in voluntary care. They told her at any given time, if she wanted him back, she would just have to give them 7 days notice. She gave them the 7 days notice, and like that same day they apprehended the child. When she came to me asking for help, at that time she was afraid that the ministry was assisting her ex, the boy's father, to get custody. She was afraid they were going to give the child over to him, and at that time she even thought maybe they'd possibly helped him with rent for a house, and the child hardly knew the father. He was kind of in and out of his life. Anyways, when they went to court for their hearing, maybe it was a presentation hearing, they set up a case conference for 3 months later instead of a protection hearing, which should have been booked for 45 days later. In the meantime, the ministry gave the boy to the father, and then when they got to the case conference, they said, oh, now that he's been living with his father for a month, we'd like him to stay there. So, basically they just took a child that was, okay at home, but mom just needed a break, and then placed him with somebody he barely knew. And we're talking about somebody with special needs, so when she found this out the other day, she was just really upset, that they'd actually done what she was afraid they were going to do, So when you have a situation like that where the mom's been looking after this, the child with the special needs for so long and knows all of his routines and all of his little quirks, and then hand him over to a bunch of professionals who, yes, maybe have, lots of academic background, but they don't know the boy, and there was no reason for it. She went to them, and what I don't understand is why the ministry will take one child from a parent and not the other. What are they saying? You're parenting this child okay, but we're afraid you're going to beat the crap out of this one? Or you're going to neglect this child and not the other? It's ridiculous. If the home is so bad off that one child needs to be apprehended, in that case it should be all of the children. It just doesn't make sense to me that one child's safe and one child isn't. What I wanted to say about statistics concerning children who've committed suicide in care is there's a couple of different, they've done like a couple of different sets of statistics, one for children who are in care, one for children who are out of care. I'm not really sure, but I believe that 21% of the children who have left foster care since maybe 1985 or 1995, I'm not sure of the actual number, but a high rate of children commit suicide after leaving care. Children in care, girls in care especially, try to commit suicide 12 times more often than children who aren't in care. And I think one of the reasons that children think of suicide as a way out is because they're being forced to do something already that doesn't feel right, and they know there's no way out. I volunteer at a street church in Victoria, and I can't count how many young girls come in there and are products of the child protection system, and their lives just aren't what they would be if they had family involved. Depression becomes something that just happens for those kids.
What happened the other day?
Yeah, there was, well, actually there was a very young girl come up to the window asking for something from the food bank, and unfortunately the food bank didn't have what she needed that day, so I went out looking for her, found her sleeping on the sidewalk outside, and it's devastating. I mean, there's another young girl she's 16 years old, who comes in quite frequently, who has a youth agreement with the ministry, and she lives in the dingiest hotel in the downtown core of Victoria. And when I saw where she lived, I just thought, is this all the government of Canada can give this girl? She didn't have a stove, she didn't have a proper fridge, the door didn't even lock properly. It was this, scary nightmare of a place for a 16-year-old girl to be living, and that's what, our top tax dollars are paying for her to have. And she has to go to a food bank, she has to use a food bank. Like, kids that have to use a food bank when they're supposed to be in the care of the Ministry of Children and Families, like, that's sick. And then there's other kids, there was a 14-year-old girl there the other day, a foster child, who has ran away so many times, that she lives in and out of shelters.
Isn't it true that the ministry gets a ton of money for children?
Well, I don't know how much they get per child, like funding-wise. I'm not sure what that number is.
But we know what they pay out to foster parents.
A foster parent would be getting a minimum of $900 for per child, I believe. I mean, it may be different, I may be off a little bit, but approximately.
I believe it's recently been raised.
And yet this girl, this 16-year-old girl, who's forced to live in a place where I'd be scared, she gets $325 for rent, and then she gets, maybe, I'm not sure, $400 on top of that for food and everything. But
that's welfare rates.
$325 for rent, that's not it. And she's a 16-year-old girl. Like, I mean, we couldn't afford anything safer. We couldn't afford, what good are they doing her? How long is it before she, turns to the streets to get what she needs? It's all around her. Drugs and prostitution.
At what point does the government stop giving money to the ministry? Is it 16 or do they keep paying? Do the ministries keep getting money off children until they're 19?
Until they're 19, and in some cases, they can keep a child in their care until they're 24 years old. Although they are legally an adult at 19, there are circumstances. They have threatened, they told me that my daughter, that they would try to get a continuing custody order on her just shortly before she turns 19, and have said that if she tried to leave the foster home before that, they may have to apprehend the baby. They'd have to do a full assessment before letting her leave. So basically they're saying, either you stay in care till you're 24, or
you take your baby.
Yeah, or possibly you take your baby, right? I mean,
How despicable.
They would consider it, poor judgment on her part to say, I want to go live by myself, because that's just the way they are. And they can say that they want a child to stay in care for educational purposes, or because they don't believe the child is emotionally capable of looking after themselves. I mean, 24 years old. By the time my daughter's 24, her kid will be, 7?
Now, what was it that the social worker told you when the ministry first came knocking on your door? What did the social worker, March 5th, tell you before you signed the agreement?
Oh, she told me that, they didn't take children away forever. They didn't do that anymore. That they only apprehended children in severe cases, and that they always returned them.
And it was 6 days later that they were gone, and you have never had them in your care again.
No, I haven't.